Hi friends, my name is Trish Roberts. You're watching Faint Signals from Vegas. So I just want to read you a tweet from Tulsi Gabbard, and then I want us to think about Donald Trump retweeting this. It's the first part of it is somebody having a retweet comment, and they said Russiagate was designed in part to help the UK counter Russian influence by baiting the United States into taking a hard line against them. Leaves us all with a more dangerous world as a consequence. Just another episode of the Great Game. And Tulsi Gabbard, he was retweeting Tulsi Gabbard. Short-sighted politicians and media pundits who've spent the last 2 years accusing Trump as a Putin puppet have brought us the expensive new Cold War and arms race. How? Because Trump now does everything he can to prove he's not a Putin puppet, even if it brings us closer to nuclear war. And Donald Trump has retweeted that. Now that's actually quite frightening that Donald Trump has actually retweeted that, because that's something actually that has been said. I mean, it's kind of nuts really that he would actually sort of be increasing the, look, there's a little paddy melon coming up to get some food. We give them little pellets at nighttime, just a few, and then they go off and find their own food, and they all come up, and this guy's a sort of an old guy. There's about 24 that come up. Sorry to interrupt, but I just thought I'd point that out. Point him out. So it's really, really sort of shocking and worrying that he's actually retweeted that, which means that he must agree with it in some way, that he's actually being more aggressive towards Russia to prove a point that he's not a Putin puppet. And that, of course, is bringing us closer to a nuclear war. I mean, I was only just reading yesterday that a B-52 nuclear bomber was actually flying close to the borders of Russia, and that they had to scramble some jets in Russia. They had to scramble them, the military, and then sort of chase that B-52 nuclear bomber away. I mean, can you imagine if Russia was flying a nuclear bomber close to California, to the borders of California or sort of Mexico? Can you imagine? The US would be beside themselves. There'd probably be a war already. And this is what they're doing all the time. They're provoking a nuclear power, and as Putin has said, you know, I think he said something to the effect of, if it looks like, you know, I don't think he said he didn't actually mean that he would cause a mutual destruction, but he sort of indicated that if it looked like they were definitely going to be attacked in a nuclear way, definitely like Russia, that they would do they would preempt an attack. They would attack the US first. But, you know, he said, of course, something to the effect of that. I don't think he really wanted to do the mutually assured destruction, but he said, like, if it looked like a first attack by the US was imminent, then, you know, he's just not going to go down like that. He's just not going to allow, you know, go down like that. I think that's what he meant. So, you know, this is very serious. The fact that Donald Trump is so clueless, he doesn't seem to have any impulse control. He just kind of retweets. He just tweets stuff. He's governing by Twitter, and he just retweets stuff that, you know, or sort of tweets things that are like policy, you know, from his Twitter site, which is sort of amazing, really. And it's no wonder every person around the place, every billionaire now wants to be president, because they sort of think, well, if Donald Trump, who's pretty clueless and stupid, George W. Bush was clueless and stupid too, but I mean, Trump is impulsive as well, and sort of seems to be always like acting like a child trying to prove a point. It gives children a bad name, really. It's no wonder that other billionaires think, well, you know, if Donald Trump can be president, then I can be president, because he's sort of an idiot, really, you know? I mean, this is how bad it is. This is how low the bar has gone. Not that, you know, I mean, the other sort of presidents have been war criminals, but they sort of have some way of pretending like they're in some ways a bit sane and not impulsive, but they're not, of course. They're sociopaths. They're psychopaths. But you know, Trump is just completely unhinged, and he's actually increased carnage of civilians by 250% in, I think it was Syria. I mean, he's sort of, if you watch the Empire Files and how Trump has actually increased the wars, there's no such thing as this non-intervention nonsense. And excuse me, I'm sure that when it comes time to, when this 2020 election, he'll be saying to people, oh well, I tried to pull out of Syria and it just wasn't possible, and yada yada. He'll try and pretend he's a non-interventionist, which is just, only complete ignorant Trump supporters would believe that. If anybody's actually paying attention, that's not the case. Anyway, I'll move on from there, but I mean, it just shows how sort of unhinged he is, that he allows a lot of this sort of Russiagate stuff to actually get him closer, to push him closer and closer to a nuclear arms race, which is actually happening as we speak, and possibly, mutually assured destruction if somebody actually makes a mistake. And there's been many mistakes made that have been saved by different people, and probably stuff that we don't even know of, almost nuclear accidents, many. One day we may not be so lucky. Anyway, so I wanted to move on to something I saw, and this sort of gives you an indication of the Australian media, owned mostly by Rupert Murdoch, who owns Fox News. And I saw an article just recently that said 2,891 Murdoch media stories trashing Islam in a single year. That was in the New Matilda, and I'll leave a link to that. So Mr. Murdoch, Mr. Rupert Murdoch, who loves to punch down on vulnerable groups like the unemployed and all those different groups, he is in part responsible for that Christchurch Mosque massacre, as well as Scott Morrison, the Prime Minister of Australia, and any other Islamophobe in Australia, any public figure that has promoted Islamophobia, and any public figure and any sort of talking head on social media that's been promoting Islamophobia, like Ben Shapiro and like Alex Jones and all those kinds of people. Mike Cernovich, and there's a whole bunch of alt-right grifters on Facebook. And even, of course, the so-called liberal media, who also, in their own way, promote Islamophobia. And then, of course, there's just the Democrats who are constantly sort of, in some way, promoting Islamophobia just by the way they have warmongering in their blood, and they constantly applaud war. And it's always, there's a lot of Muslim-majority countries that have been suffering, and millions of a couple of million, or almost a couple of million in Iraq have died, have been killed by Western imperialism. So, all of this combined, it's all Islamophobia, even if it's not coming out of our mouths in direct ways, like Fraser Anning, who is blaming, this is a senator in Australia, who's appalling, and he's a Nazi, basically. I don't even know how he got elected. And he's been under a tremendous blowback from his comments that Muslims are responsible for that massacre in Christchurch. And hopefully he'll be out on his ear next election. There's a federal election coming up in April. Is it April or May? Sorry, there's a federal election coming up anyway in a couple of months. So, but, it doesn't have to be outright verbally, sort of saying stuff like Senator Anning. It can just be sort of applauding wars in these countries and being complicit by not saying anything even. Because all of this, as George Galloway was saying recently, there'll be blowback from this terrible massacre, because a lot of Muslims saw that live feed. They didn't see it live, but they saw the copies of it floating around the internet by the Daily Mail and some other news source. And even though New Zealand has said they will imprison people for 14 years if they're caught selling that live, that massacre video or something like that, it's still out there now, and they'll never be able to get it back. And George Galloway said, for sure there's going to be people die as a result of that video, because there'll be Muslims that will just, and why wouldn't you? They're under constant assault, either by the media or by politicians, or their countries are being destroyed, or their asylum seekers, like here in Australia, are being sent to these detention centres, and they're being treated like in such appalling ways, So it's no wonder that sorry, I've had to drop my voice. There's a neighbour close by. You'll think I'm talking to myself. Anyway, they will have seen all of the, they've seen all of the sort of, like, it's like a war of ideologies. They might view it like that. And even Mike Pompeo has actually called this thing with Islam and Christianity as a war of ideologies. That's how he sees it. And do you know what Mike Pompeo said recently about Trump giving, in quotes, the Golan Heights that's been stolen from Syria by Israel? They've been occupying it for ages. Giving the Golan Heights to Syria, to Israel. Pompeo said Trump is some sort of gift from God to Israel or something. He's like, he believes in the rapture. These are the sort of people they have in that administration. I mean, not that I don't think there was other, sort of really wacky people in other administrations that were Christian fascists, but Pompeo is actually outright a Christian fascist. Like he just says stuff like that now. They're just completely unabashed. They don't even try to hide it. And speaking of not trying to hide anything, on I think it was Fox News the other day, there was an ex-Brigadier General who was, I can't find the actual video. I can't even remember where I saw it. I don't think it was the Jimmy Dore show, but it was somewhere where I saw this ex-Brigadier General actually saying to the Fox News presenter that Maduro might find that he has a bullet to the forehead, and that's the way he leaves Venezuela. I mean, just the fact that, like, this is like, that's actually terrorism promoting the assassination of a world leader, a democratically elected world leader, Nicolas Maduro. It's actually a terrorist thing. And do you think anybody would arrest him? Of course not. I mean, the US has also already participated in attempting to assassinate President Nicolas Maduro of Venezuela, with those drones exploding. This is a few months ago. They're determined by any means necessary to get the oil that is in Venezuela. They're determined by, and this is what worries me, is because I sort of wonder if they're ever going to give up, because they desperately want that oil. And that's one of the reasons I think they wanted Israel to have the Golan Heights, because Trump knows that he will benefit from that, in energy sources. I think, I don't know if it's oil, I think it might even be, I don't know. But, and also strategically, because Israel and the US are, great allies. Israel being an ethno-supremacist state, and literally an apartheid state. And so, they're partners in crime, the US and Israel. So anyway, but they, I just sort of feel like they're going to be relentless in their efforts by any means necessary to invade Venezuela. They're using every possible means to bring that country to its knees by crippling economic sanctions. They won't be happy until they have either assassinated Maduro or invaded in some way, like they did to Chile with Allende. And anyway, so, they're just trying to invade as many countries that have not yet submitted. So anyway, and I wanted to talk about, so, that to me, about that ex-Brigadier General saying that, they're just absolutely, totally unabashed and arrogant. They're just completely out in the open now. And, the CIA, like here is Kathy Griffin being sort of hunted down by the CIA and Interpol and everything, and she's been persecuted for the last year or so for holding, she's a comedian, and she was holding up this sort of sculpted looking head with tomato sauce on it of Donald Trump. So she's never heard the end of it. And here's somebody actually sort of talking about assassinating President Nicolas Maduro, in a bullet to the head, and I don't see any CIA trying to arrest him. You see, it's just it's all just completely out, the mask is off, of empire. Mueller report, by the way, I wanted to mention that, I don't follow all that stuff because it's just such nonsense of this Russiagate stuff. But I mean, there's been no evidence of collusion. Like, he is corrupt, okay? Trump is corrupt. They're all corrupt, but he's corrupt. He was corrupt before he even got into office, so they probably already knew that. They could have easily found out that he was corrupt before he even got into office, and they would have, they could have cancelled him out. But they didn't want to, because they wanted him in the race. So, well, certain people did, like Hillary Clinton, and she, with her Pied Piper strategy of her campaign to get him to be, they wanted him to be an opponent so that they thought that she could be elected. And that's where all the Russiagate stuff came in, the Podesta emails and stuff, which were actually a leak, not a hack by Russia. It was a leak by somebody within the DNC. But anyway, and that's where all this Russiagate nonsense came from. And anyway, Bill Maher, who's an Islamophobe, and he's a comedian, and I use the word loosely, and he's complete Democratic shill. He was saying, "Oh, I don't have to see the Mueller report to think that Trump is a traitor." Well, here's my idea of what a traitor is. Any politician who is willing to sacrifice the health and well-being of the people of their country is, to me, a traitor to those people, a traitor to the country. I see, say, for example, Juan Guaido, who's a self-appointed, non-elected person in Venezuela, who's asked the U.S. to invade militarily Venezuela. He is a traitor to his country, because basically once the U.S. get a foothold, they're like the mafia. It'll be appalling for people living there, and any sort of standard of living they have, any sort of socialist aims they have, will go out the window. Everything will be privatized. The US will pillage and plunder their resources, and they will not benefit one iota from it. And they'll install dictators so that they can manipulate those dictators in whatever way they want. And that's what Juan Guaido is. And he's been groomed for at least 10 years by a group called Canvas, which is part of the National Endowment for Democracy, which is a CIA regime-changing organization. So, I mean, that's what's going to happen to Venezuela should Juan Guaido ever become the president, if the U.S. actually militarily invades and wins. And it'll be a bloodbath for everybody. But that is what my idea of what a traitor is, somebody who actually invites the U.S. into their country, and the U.S. just pillages and plunders, and everybody that lives there in the country, the civilians of that country, end up suffering greatly. And neoliberalism sets in. I mean, I see any politician here that help, and the CIA actually admitted helping get rid of Gough Whitlam here in Australia in 1975. The CIA admitted that. And Gough Whitlam was for free healthcare, free public education, and really great with Indigenous rights and all of that. So he was gotten rid of, and the CIA admitted that. And ever since then, it's been a downhill slide of neoliberalism. And now it's very, very expensive to live. Things are very expensive. I mean, if I want to have a cup of coffee, I have to share it with somebody. Like, I mean, that's how, cups of coffee are expensive here, and everything is expensive. It's sort of beyond a lot of things that I used to be able to do in Australia that were just kind of most people were able to do. You have to really think twice about doing it. It's actually a major expense. Everything is very expensive, and that's what's happened. Ever since 1975, neoliberalism has set in. Corporations get richer, and the Australian society is swimming in debt now. It never was like that. We have really high debt levels. And as somebody predicted, it's going to end up like the US one day if it keeps going like that. That's why neoliberalism has to end. And when I say traitors, there was Paul Keating and Bob Hawke. They were two Australian prime ministers. They actually started introducing neoliberal policies. They were from the Labor Party. The Labor Party, who's supposed to be for the people, who's supposed to be for unions and so forth. They and the other government, the other side of the aisle, there's more than two parties here, but the main parties are the Liberal Party, the Coalition, and the Labor Party. Well, both of those parties have been basically serving corporations for the last 35 years or so. That to me, they are traitors. I consider them traitors to this country, to the people of this country. Anybody. So, when Bill Maher selectively says something like Donald Trump is a traitor, seriously, all the presidents since World War II in particular have been traitors to the country. In fact, the founding fathers of that country, the US, were traitors to the country. They were looking after themselves when they wrote the Constitution. They were oligarchs and real estate people. They betrayed the indigenous people of that country. They're all traitors to the country. They were white supremacists, the founding fathers. I mean, George Washington, he actually used to steal land off indigenous people and then sell it. And he had slaves. These people had slaves. They were traitors to the country, to the people. And now it continues on. Nothing good can come from that beginning. Nothing good can come from our beginning in Australia, really, where there was a genocide of indigenous people. And now their culture, a lot of their culture is completely destroyed. And the people are struggling, just like indigenous people are in the US, struggling with alcohol abuse, problems and all that sort of thing. And that's because we've destroyed them as their culture. White supremacy and colonialism has destroyed them. We have betrayed the indigenous people of this land with our invasions, and we have betrayed people who have since settled here because of the awful neoliberal policies and so forth. It's just it's a traitorous thing all over the place, everything. So that's my idea of what a traitor is. So when people sort of think that suddenly somebody's a traitor, like stupid Bill Maher, who's just a big Islamophobe and a Democratic shill, that awful party, the Democratic Party, I just think, God, you're either incredibly ignorant or you're just completely full of BS. Like as if everything's going to be fine if and when Trump gets ousted and somebody else is in. And speaking of awful parties like the Democratic Party in the US, I just want to give you an example of how the Democratic Party, once again, is trying to make sure that no progressive, and I use that word lightly because I'm not sure exactly who is really progressive in that party, even the people that they think are progressive. But anyway, let's just put, for the sake of argument, let's just call them progressive. So anybody who, like for example, anybody who wants to challenge an incumbent, the Democratic Party has introduced a law recently that anybody who wants to challenge an incumbent in the Democratic Party, and this is sort of any political machine, like political group, that is helping a progressive challenge an incumbent Democrat, they can expect a ban forever from doing any work with any campaigns, on any campaigns in the Democratic Party. So they basically made a law that will dissuade any political group that helps with the campaign of a progressive who is challenging a corporate Democrat, an incumbent. They will be banned from doing anything with the Democratic Party forever. So since there's only really two major parties there, and these people probably prefer to work with Democrats, that means that their career is over, really. So that will dissuade them from helping any progressive from challenging a corporate Democrat. They won't want to do it because their career will have ended. So this is how the Democratic Party, this corrupt party, who rigs primaries against people like Bernie Sanders, and unfortunately Bernie Sanders didn't challenge them. People were begging him to challenge the rigging of that primary in 2016, and he refused to do so. But that sort of basically means that, it basically means that the Democratic Party has been doing whatever it can, and it would rather have a GOP candidate win, a Republican win, in any sort of races in the country than have a progressive win. That's really how it is. And they're trying to bring in all these sort of laws and rules to make sure that progressives don't get any assistance or that they're dissuaded from running, and basically sabotaging anybody who wants to challenge any corporate Democrat. So that's that party for you, and I have no idea why anybody, and see things like the Justice Democrats, who their actual mission supposedly is to basically challenge these corporate Democrats, and that's why, and they put in candidates that are supposed to be progressive against these corporate Democrats. Well, that's their mission, the Justice Democrats. I don't like them, but anyway, that's their. I don't know why anybody tries to reform that awful corporate war-loving party, but you know, whatever, from within it's not possible. It's a write-off as far as I'm concerned. But that's what the Justice Democrats, that's their mission. So that means that anybody who is working with the Justice Democrats to campaign to a political group that is helping with the campaign of any of those Justice Democrat progressives that are challenging the incumbents, they will be banned from doing anything with the Democratic Party. So there you go. That's the Democratic Party for you. That's I think it's the DCCC or something. So, you know, they're appalling. You know, Dem exit. I mean, seriously, why on earth would you waste any time on that awful, awful, corrupt primary rigging party? I mean, and I've said this before, I don't even know why anybody thinks that, just say, and I don't particularly like Tulsi Gabbard because I think she's totally pro-Israel, and let me talk about that just for a moment after I finish this segment. You know, Tulsi Gabbard or Bernie Sanders, they're not going to get through the primary because you know, I've said this before, the DNC has actually admitted that they choose who they're going to have as their presidential nominee, and they don't really have to pay any attention to who wins the primary. They've actually said that in a lawsuit that was brought against them about this issue. So I don't know why anybody thinks that any of these people that are selected, any of these people that are so-called progressives are ever going to get through. You know, they're not going to let it happen. So why do people waste their money, their $27 and all this sort of thing? And speaking of Tulsi Gabbard, I've done a video just recently about my thoughts about her laying low about her pro-Israel stance, and her, you know, speaking at the Christians United for Israel, which is a right-wing group, right-wing Zionist group, and all sorts of things. Like, you know, I've said what I feel about that. I feel like she's laying low and trying not to bring attention to that. And I've happened to catch her. I don't know how, because I'm in a different time zone. I think it was just luck. But I've happened to catch her on Instagram with a couple of live streams that Tulsi Gabbard has given just lately in the last 2 days. So, and she'd asked this question during the live stream, so have you got any questions for me? So I typed out, what is your position on Israel, on giving $10 million a day to Israel, which is very clearly now an apartheid state? I would phrase it in different ways. And in one of the live streams, I actually said, spread it out, but I said 4 times in different ways about the same question, in different ways, pointing out different things. But it was all about, you know, her position on Palestinian rights. And even though there was probably, how many people were on this live stream? There actually wasn't that many, because I think it was at an odd hour. And I don't think there was any way she could have not seen those questions, right? And she just completely ignored them. I could see her skipping over my questions and answering sort of really kind of fluffy questions about how she's going to reach 65,000, you know, individual donors so she can appear on the debate stage, that sort of thing. But she ignored in one live stream 4 of my questions when she was asking people what are their questions. I don't think that's an accident that she's ignored 4 of my questions about Palestine. I really don't. So she's purposefully, I feel, she's purposefully ignoring that. Then the second live stream, which was, I think, either today or yesterday, it was at an odd hour as well. I did the same thing. She asked, is there any questions? I saw people's, you know, you can see the live feed of people's comments and questions. And I could see her skipping over my question, and I was trying not to be spammy or anything, but you know, I asked it twice. I could see her skipping over my questions, you know, and speaking about fluff. So, I really feel like, she's trying to lay low. She's trying not to talk about that, and hoping that she can get through the debates and all of that and get up to and end up probably, if there's an absolute miracle, which I don't think is going to happen, but, if, say, Bernie Sanders becomes the Democratic nominee, which is highly unlikely, even though he's probably be more popular than Kamala Harris, who it appears they have definitely chosen. If Bernie Sanders and Bernie Sanders picked Tulsi Gabbard as his running mate, she's pro-Israel. I really feel she is, and she's just trying to lay low and trying not to, just being quiet about it and hoping that people won't talk about it. Meanwhile, she's talking about anti-interventionism and all that, and that's very good. But I mean, if you are okay with apartheid Israel, if you are okay, if you're saying in your Twitter feed that I am against Israel snipers killing unarmed Palestinians, but you're okay supporting Israel $10 million a day and all of that, then you are okay with them killing Palestinians that are unarmed, like women, children, medics, paraplegics, press people, etc., at the fence of the open-air prison that is Gaza. You cannot have a bet both ways. You cannot say, I'm against the killing of these innocent civilians by snipers, and then be supporting Israel, because the only way Israel can continue on with that apartheid state is because the US empire is giving them $10 million a day and supporting them like that. They could not continue on with this without that financial support and the general support that the US give them. So she's had close ties with the Christians United for Israel, which is a fascist Christian sort of a group, really right-wing, and Adelson, who is a major, he's a major supporter of Israel. He wants, that's why Trump has been going on about Iran for all his presidency, because Adelson gave him a huge amount of money for his presidential campaign. Adelson basically supports the GOP. So if you are supported by Adelson, you are expected to be pro-Israel, and you're expected to be wanting to invade Iran. That's why Trump has always been talking about invading Iran ever since he got into office. That's why Mike Pompeo is constantly talking about how bad Iran is and all this sort of nonsense. And John Bolton. It's just appalling. But anyway, so that's something to keep in mind about Tulsi Gabbard. I don't think it's an accident that she was skipping over 4 questions when there really wasn't that many people on that live stream. 4 questions about Palestine. I really feel like she's intentionally laying low and hoping that people just won't ask her stuff about that. And I think we'll probably find out if by some miracle Bernie Sanders she gets through a Democratic primary and becomes the presidential the Democratic nominee against Trump, and he picks Tulsi Gabbard as a running mate. I think you'll find out when they ask her does she support Israel, she'll probably say yes. And Bernie Sanders keeps going back and forth on Palestine. Palestinians, I have no idea really where he stands. Now he's pointing out that Israel is an apartheid state. He's just all over the place, like a dog's breakfast, as I like to say. It was only like a year and a half ago or something that he was signing a letter with 100 other Congress people, asking the UN to stop their being biased against Israel. He's just all over the place. Anyway, I just sort of feel like, how can you say you're anti-interventionist and anti-war when you're okay with an ongoing genocide of a group like the Palestinians? How can you say that? You know what I'm saying? It just doesn't work. It doesn't work for me. It's just not. It doesn't work. Anyway, and the last thing I wanted to talk about is Jacinta Ardern, the Prime Minister of New Zealand. She's been getting a lot of kudos for the way she's handled this mosque massacre and how incredibly supportive of the community, which she says they are us. And I truly believe it. You know how people say politically expedient things? Not that I'm saying she's not incapable of political expediency, but she's always come across to me as somebody who seems to be the real, a fairly decent person and actually really cares. And I think she's done an amazing job. And I think, it shouldn't be seen as special, really. It should be just we being human, to be so supportive of a group that's going to be traumatized for decades after this. There's going to be PTSD and all sorts of things after this. And Muslims already feel unsafe. And that, of course, has sparked some other unfortunate crimes, like copycat crimes of damaging a mosque in Birmingham, smashing the windows and stuff. It's intended to terrorize this group. And so Jacinta Ardern has been getting all sorts of praise from leaders all around the world, which is great to see, and saying that this is a real leader, and I agree, this is a real leader. I see it, though, as it's just being human, to want to support and give as much support and love to a group that's is being vilified constantly in the media and by alt-righters and neo-Nazis, and all their countries are being bombed and all this sort of thing by Western allies and stuff. It's, that's the least we can do. So, but, I even saw, I think it was somewhere, some country had projected an image of her hugging a woman in a hijab, and she was also in a hijab. I think it's really great that she has donned a hijab and in solidarity. And I just really like her. I really like her, and I hope that she is the real deal in other things. I really don't follow her in her what she does in her own country, but I just think this particular incident has been really great, how she's handled this. And I wish that we had a Prime Minister like that. I wish we had Jacinta Ardern, and I think there's a lot of other people who have actually said the same thing. I wish we had a Prime Minister like Jacinta Ardern. Anyway, if we can snaffle her, I don't know. Anyway, so, and the last thing is that, the US, of course, is continuing to provoke China. They did they did this drill just recently where they captured a Japanese island, a small Japanese island, to show that they're not, sort of fooling around or whatever. I don't know why they think that's going to particularly frighten the Chinese, because, it's capturing a small Japanese island. But anyway, you see, this is the saber rattling towards Russia and China, and Russia and China are escalating their buildup of military weapons and nuclear weapons and all that kind of thing. And so this is the nuclear arms race is very dangerous, and I don't know how it's going to end. I don't know if there's just a ploy to get people to buy weapons so the weapons manufacturers make a big profit. I don't know, or if it's just that they're insane, which I think that's more the case. You have insane people like, I'm sorry to use that word, I'm not trying to be ableist, but I really feel like you'd have to be somewhat completely a psychopath to be able to be promoting the sort of things that John Bolton and Mike Pompeo are doing, trying to sort of, they have no thought for mass murder or no problems with it. So really that's pretty much all I wanted to say, just that, as usual, the US continues on with provocation of nuclear powers, and at some point that may end very, very badly for all of us. And so if climate crisis does not get us first, it will be some sort of nuclear Armageddon thing. I mean, what a world to be living in at the moment. Do you often think that about how things are? It's never been this bad. It's just so all over the place how bad it is. At a later stage, I'll probably talk about Jared Kushner and how he's been, I've talked about this already, but that he's been sort of dealing with Saudi Arabia and giving them, I think, nuclear secrets or something. And that's sort of such an insanity. That is such a unstable and sort of out there monarchy in Saudi Arabia. And the Kushners, Ivanka Trump and Jared Kushner, are a bit of a they're a little kleptocracy of their own. They're a kakistocracy. I mean, they are making deals that are benefiting them profit-wise all over the place. And Jared Kushner he shouldn't have a security clearance, and he's going around. He's completely unqualified, and he's just I don't know, it's just frightening having somebody like him who is doesn't seem, he's, I don't know, I find him a very sort of frightening character, and he's doing a lot behind the scenes that is not good, particularly this thing with Saudi Arabia. So that's something to look out for. So anyway, that's really all I wanted to talk about. I know that's a lot of stuff. I actually didn't think I would spend that much time speaking about this, but there you go. I should really break these videos up a bit, and maybe I will. So anyway, thanks so much for watching. Please click the like button if you like the content. Please subscribe and click the notifications bell, otherwise you don't receive any updates. And please leave comments. I enjoy your comments. And thanks so much for watching. My name is Trish Roberts. You're watching Faint Signals from Vigo. Till next time. Bye for now.